It's 3 a.m. You weren't even thinking about anything stressful. And now you're replaying a conversation from 4 years ago, wondering if you locked the front door, and mentally rehearsing an argument that hasn't happened yet. Here's the strange part. Your brain isn't malfunctioning. It's doing exactly what it's built to do. It's just doing it at the worst possible time, with nothing else around to stop it. Start with what's actually happening at 3 a.m. specifically. Your brain runs on a roughly 24-hour cortisol curve. Cortisol is a stress hormone, and normally it drops through the evening and stays low overnight, letting your body rest. But in the early hours before dawn, that curve begins climbing again, quietly, hours before you actually wake up. Somewhere in that pre-dawn window, your brain is already shifting into a more alert, more vigilant state, even while you're still lying in the dark trying to sleep. At the exact same time, a completely different system switches on. It's called the default mode network, and it activates specifically when you're not focused on any external task, no conversation, no screen, no problem in front of you to solve. Lying in bed in the dark is close to a perfect trigger for it. The default mode network's job is self-referential thinking, replaying memories, imagining future conversations, running simulations of your own life. It's useful. It's also the exact network responsible for rumination, for that looping, repetitive replay of an old argument or an embarrassing moment from years ago. So at 3 a.m., you get rising cortisol pushing your brain toward alertness at the exact moment the network responsible for mental replay switches on, with almost nothing else competing for your attention. Here's the part that makes this so hard to escape. Under normal conditions, you have a kind of internal traffic controller for this, a region called the anterior cingulate cortex. Its job is noticing when a thought has become unproductive and redirecting your attention elsewhere. In people prone to heavy rumination, brain imaging shows this region has reduced connectivity to the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that handles logic and perspective. The controller is there. It's just underpowered, especially late at night, when the prefrontal cortex is already running on fumes from a full day of decisions. Which means the one system built to interrupt the loop is the same system that's weakest exactly when the loop is strongest. There's a third player making this worse, and it's the one most people never expect. The amygdala, your brain's emotional alarm system, doesn't just sit quietly waiting for the day to end. If your stress system was activated at any point that day, the amygdala can stay keyed up into the evening, tagging every thought the default mode network generates with an extra hit of emotional weight. A neutral memory starts to feel urgent. A minor mistake starts to feel catastrophic, not because the event changed, because the system reading the event is running hot. So you end up with 3 systems, working exactly as designed, stacking on top of each other at the same time. Rising cortisol pushing alertness up, the default mode network generating replay content with nothing else to focus on. The amygdala tagging that content as more threatening than it actually is, and the one region that could normally interrupt all of it running under capacity. Here's the detail that should genuinely unsettle you. This isn't a one-night problem. Research tracking people's stress and thought patterns day to day found that on days when someone ruminated more than their personal average, their cortisol the following morning ran roughly 24% higher than normal. Higher cortisol makes the next round of nighttime rumination easier to trigger and harder to stop. Your worst night doesn't just cost you sleep, it quietly primes the next night to be worse too. This is also why 3 a.m. thoughts feel so disproportionately dramatic compared to how they look the next morning. It's not that your judgment improves by breakfast. It's that the exact chemical and neural conditions that made the thought feel urgent the cortisol spike, the amygdala's heightened tagging, the weakened prefrontal filter have all reset. The thought didn't get smaller. The system reading it got calmer. There's one more piece of this worth knowing, because it explains why the cost isn't just a groggy morning. The window your brain is supposed to spend transitioning into deep, slow-wave sleep is also when it performs its most important overnight maintenance, clearing out metabolic waste and consolidating what you learned that day. When rumination hijacks that window instead, you don't just lose rest. You specifically lose the repair process. Your prefrontal cortex needs to function well the next day, which leaves the exact region responsible for controlling rumination even weaker going into the following night. That's the loop in full. Bad night, weaker regulation, higher cortisol, easier rumination, worse sleep, weaker regulation again. None of this means your brain is broken, or that the thoughts themselves are meaningless. The regions doing this work, the default mode network especially, overlap heavily with the same circuitry used for genuine creative problem solving. Brain scans of someone ruminating and someone working through a real, solvable problem look remarkably similar. The machinery isn't the issue. It's that at 3 a.m., with no real problem to solve and no prefrontal traffic controller strong enough to redirect it, that same machinery just keeps idling, replaying content that already happened, or hasn't happened at all, because it has nothing productive left to point itself at. So the next time it's 3 a.m., and your mind won't stop circling something that felt small yesterday, you're not weak, and you're not thinking about it wrong. You're watching 3 separate systems, each doing exactly its job, collide at the one moment when none of them are working together. The thought will feel smaller by morning, not because you solved anything, because the system reading it finally will have calmed back down.